have an amount for undetermined resolution, for unfunded resolution. You would have to agree on that. But and then if things were within the mandate, but not within the program of work that would come, as did happen this time round, there was a seed fund, not a lot of money, but enough to get things started, because once they get started, they can kind of roll off in a better way. There are other ways of doing it, of course, assessed contributions, et cetera, but that might get too heavy and complicated. And there may very well be amongst you and amongst my colleagues better solutions. But it's clear to me that it's a thing that we need to find the key to, so that this does not become an irritant or an upset to member states who rightfully would wish to see their resolutions implemented. So these were some just points that I wanted to make to be sure that there is an understanding. What we try to do this time round for the UNEA 5, as resolutions began to emerge, we issued a technical note. You may recall there was a legal note, or whatever we call it, a legal section, a financing section, and a third section. My colleagues will tell me in a minute, their brains will go into overdrive now. But the budget section did say what would be the, there was a preliminary budget estimate. But of course, in negotiations, that budget estimate was probably not featuring. And so there might well have been some of those disconnects. So look, as we move forward, we from UNEP side are very happy to engage in a how do we find solutions to this, because I think that's an irritant that we need to take off the table, so that there can be no doubt whatsoever that there is no hierarchy or prioritization, but that member states' wish is our command on resolutions, but that there is a reality of a program of work getting approved and a set of resolutions that may not always find a harbor within the program of work in terms of the budget. So, Mr. Chair, Excellency, this is what I wanted to just mention. Obviously, very keen to have the presentation done by my colleague, and then to engage with member states as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Edith. Thank you very much for your very clear way of putting things, regarding funding. Certainly is going to be a challenge, but we had to find a way, as you just referred to. So I thank you very much. With this, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Tim Kasten, please, Director of Policy and Program Division. Tim, you are welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Inger. Let me start by being responsive to the ED's request. Yes, the technical notes have legal components, the costing components, and the relationship to the program of work. Those are the three main sections of those notes that you'll find going back to the UNEA. Good afternoon, again, distinguished representatives. I'm pleased to provide a short presentation on the UNEA Monitoring and Reporting Portal. The portal was requested from UN Environment Assembly Resolution 422 and was launched finally at the 7th Annual Subcommittee, 2 subcommittees ago, on 16th of October 2020. We are pleased that the portal has been a useful tool for many member states to keep track of not only the progress on UNEA resolutions, but also to provide a repository for UNEP's program performance reporting and quarterly reports. At the same time, we're encouraging even further use of the portal for member states and stakeholders to stay up to date on our progress. And one of our objectives today is to introduce new representatives to the portal, as well as to provide a reminder and information on updates to those that have used it in the past. Next slide. Very briefly, I'm just going to talk about what the current resolutions reporting framework is, give an overview of the portal, and what are our steps going forward. Next slide. As noted, the UNEA Monitoring and Reporting Portal was developed as part of the reporting framework on resolutions agreed to at the CPR at a subcommittee meeting on February 27, 2020, and pursuant to UNEA Resolution 422 on the implementation and follow-up of UNEA resolutions. The portal, however, is just one element of the reporting framework to member states and stakeholders. The overall framework also includes dedicated reporting to the CPR upon request. In other words, some of the deep dive reporting that we do, the annual and biennial program performance reports, and finally, quarterly reports to the CPR. This in its totality make up the reporting framework. Next slide. Moving on to the portal itself, as requested by UNEA 4 and agreed by the CPR, the portal is a dedicated platform for reporting and tracking progress on the implementation of UNEA outcomes. The portal has multiple components as well as inputs. On components, first, it includes outcomes from all UNEA resolutions, or all UNEA assemblies, including decisions, resolutions, and the declarations of those meetings. It includes UNEP POW, the program of work, and budget documents, reporting on individual resolutions, as well as the POW implementation reports. In terms of the inputs into the portal, we have 6 monthly mandatory reporting by members of the Secretariat to make sure the portal stays up to date. And additionally, while many resolutions call upon action by the Secretariat, as you are aware, many resolutions call upon you, the member states, to also implement parts of resolutions as well. Therefore, to provide the full picture of resolution implementation, the portal is also open to voluntary reporting by member states. Next slide. The portal can be accessed by member states, accredited stakeholders, and the UNEP Secretariat. Member states and accredited stakeholders can directly access the portal using their registered email addresses or indirectly through the PaperSmart portal. Different users have different interactions with the portal, including Secretariat updates and Secretariat administration. Member states access and reporting rights, and open access by accredited stakeholders to access and review reporting. If I can, Mr. Chair, let me pause for just a moment to screen a short video that walks through the portal's functionality and in direct response to actually some of the comments and questions that we received in this morning's session. Thank you. As again, as was requested this morning, there was a request for some training sessions. We hope this video will provide a little bit of information, but again, we can provide more specific reviews in the CPR meetings as necessary. Let me just provide some brief information on usage of the portal as of just last week. We have 85 member states that have registered at least one user. And of those 85 member states, 61 have at least one user who has logged on to the portal since its launch. We've had a total of 119 users from the 61 member states and 45 users from 36 accredited organizations have accessed the portal. The portal's homepage, as you could see from the video, now displays two dashboards. The first is a summary of the outcome progress reports submitted by the Secretariat for each annual reporting cycle since 2020. We've had 181 UNEA outcome reports submitted by the Secretariat since June of 2020, and in total, UNEP has published 240 UNEA outcome reports. These include reports even prior to the launch, back to December 2019, and even earlier as we were populating the portal. We also have the second dashboard, which is the portal's homepage, displaying the outcome milestone attainment status for each reporting period starting in December 2020. And we hope these milestones provide you with information to track progress in implementing the outcomes. These reports that we provide in the portal have 5 different sections. The first to provide in an introductory way, a summary of what the resolution is about, what the mandate is, and what the member states' actions may be. In the implementation, we have the implementation plan, milestones, results, the resources needed, and partners. We also have opportunities, challenges, and risks, as well as links to relevant projects, the SDGs, the multilateral environmental agreements that are relevant, and next steps on the resolution. Member states, in line with the Resolution 422, the portal provides an opportunity for member states to provide voluntary reports. As I mentioned, member states can now designate reporting focal points to voluntarily report on their behalf. Thus far, 20 national focal points have been designated by 5 countries. Finally, member states requested UNEP to make this information on resolution outcomes available to the public as well. So UNEA resolutions and the associated outcome reports are now available on the UNEP Open Data Portal. The Open Data Portal is a public platform that displays UNEP's projects and now resolution implementation to increase overall transparency in UNEP's work. And based on the feedback we've gotten so far on the portal, our next steps include to promote more comprehensive reporting. That is, Secretariat reporting is only part of the picture, and there's a need to expand voluntary reporting by member states. We want to further improve functionalities, integration, and aesthetics of the site, including the enhanced functionality of the resolutions reporting on the UNEP Open Data. We want to promote the use of UNEA monitoring and reporting portal to strengthen support to member states. We also would like to use this to rationalize our reporting. We'd like to enhance the use of the portal and its reports to minimize additional written reporting on resolutions while maintaining the current practice of deep dive reporting to the CPR on request. We hope to discuss this particular issue a bit further on agenda item 8B on Thursday. We'd like to strengthen the data analytics of the implementation of resolutions and what causes one resolution to move ahead more quickly than another and what can be done to address these issues. We also hope that this repository of resolutions will help to enhance the design of future mandates by improving clarity on and implementation of existing mandates and avoiding potential duplication. And finally, to improve the analytics on usage, which we hope will help us to continually enhance the portal for continued use. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Very interesting and clear presentation on the portal, which I'm sure answers a lot of questions put up this morning by delegations. After this, I'd like to open the floor to delegations who would like to comment or suggest after this these presentations made by Tim and certainly over ED. Thank you. Delegations, you have the floor. The EU has the floor, please. Rasa, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair, and very good to see you on podium doing the job sharing. And thank you very much, Tim, for this presentation. Well, I think I will be very short. My instructions from member states actually say that the portal is very useful and we have to thank for all the information in it. However, myself, I'm not able to access the portal, and it's not even very easy to see where do I ask for help. So that's one thing, which I'm sure is possible to solve quickly. And the second point is, or question, do you also provide this information on the portal at the newcomer session? Because that seems to be one of the most important things for the newcomers. Thank you.
Yes, it seems that Malawi had requested for the floor, but he is already here. Yes, Malawi, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing Malawi once again. My delegation would like to sincerely thank the Secretariat for the update that has been provided on the implementation of resolutions and decisions from UNEA 5. From the outset, we would like to express our appreciation to the management and staff, as well as the donors and cooperating partners, for the progress made in implementing the each resolution. We are aware that compliance with the requirements of each resolution in terms of activities timelines is at varying stages. While these differences obviously on the basis of the nature of each resolution's operative paragraphs, Malawi would like to appreciate the synopsis or general analysis to be provided by the Secretariat on the factors that are responsible for the pace at which the various resolutions are being implemented. An executive summary of factors underlying variances in delivery is very helpful, especially for a quick reading, appreciation, and feedback by member states. Having said the above, Mr. Chair, my delegation's attention is specifically drawn to the 3 resolutions that were sponsored by the African Group, namely on biodiversity and health, circular economy, and green recovery. On biodiversity and health, we note that the Secretariat refers to 2 vehicles for implementation, namely UNEP's contribution to One Health Quadripartite Alliance and the Nature for Health Donor Trust Fund. However, we would like to receive information that speaks more directly, if not clearly, to the requirements of operative paragraph 1, 3, and 4. For instance, operative paragraph 1 calls for assistance to member states in taking action, while operative paragraph 3 requests for awareness raising in the basis of the best available science. How does the notion of the 2 vehicles speak to these 2 expectations? Does it mean that these expectations will depend on the joint plan of action and the call for expression of interest? We would like to get specific responses on these queries. All in all, our view is that the information provided under Resolution 5/6 of the document UNEP/CPR/ASC.9/9 in view of operative paragraph 1, 3, and 4 is not satisfactory and not very clear. Mr. Chair, on circular economy resolution with the longer title, we take note that the Secretariat is ably responding to the requirements of the operative paragraph 9 on collecting information. While awaiting the release of the report on the used heavy-duty vehicles, we would appreciate information on when in 2023 the report is expected to be released. Secondly, we would like to know which are the 3 main developed markets that are referred to, and furthermore, which are the recipient developing countries targeted in the study. It would be also useful to understand the factors that that led to the choices of these sites, both origin and destination. We look forward to the responses to these questions. Meanwhile, we certainly look forward to the recommendation section of the report. On green recovery, which two following negotiations at UNEA 5.2 took on a different title, we look like to express similar sentiments as done regarding the resolutions of biodiversity and health. We find that there is no clear clarity and linkages between the information in document UNEP stroke CPR stroke AS.9/3 and resolution 5/10 and the requirements of operative paragraph 3, 4, and 5 of the resolution on the green recovery. Once again, in our view, the information provided is not satisfactory and not very clear. We therefore request for the necessary responses from the Secretariat. Mr. Chair, as I conclude, let me make this point. We know that getting updates on implementation of these resolutions is through the CPR meetings. We understand that direct contacts with thematic leads or resolution coordinators, or whichever is correct, is another way. We would like, therefore, and in that regard, to encourage the Secretariat to take the lead in engaging with and be responsive to requests for engagements from regional or such related structures to provide information in a more intimate and personalized manner. In saying this, my delegation has in mind the African group in Nairobi, as well as the SADC group. The latter, that is the SADC group, which is one of the 5 regional economic blocks in Africa, has a non-active structure in Nairobi. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you most sincerely for the kind attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Malawi. Next on my list of speakers is Netherlands. Please, you have the floor, Rudy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for this presentation. Indeed, we had similar difficulties of accessing the portal that was just indicated by our colleague from the European Union, and actually this raised the question. So apparently, for some member states that have security on their devices, it is not possible to access immediately. If you enter your email, you get access denied kind of message. But this is probably that we can overcome with the help of the Secretariat. But it did raise the question why this information is actually not publicly available. I can understand it for the section where member states or stakeholders are requested to upload information on their part of the reporting. But it seems to me, unless you can explain otherwise, that all the information that you provide is actually public information. So would it be possible maybe in the next iteration of the portal to have only where people are requested to upload information under some sort of login system, whereas all the other information that you can click on could be available for everyone? So that is one question. I also wanted to ask whether you have been able to follow how many member states so far have been using the portal, and besides your report on the information that has been uploaded by some of our member states, how it is used and to what extent you have information on that already. Also, do you envisage to reach out to member states at some point in time to get input to further, I don't know how you framed it, to further have it look nicer, increase its user friendliness, etc. And just to indicate that after we have received your briefing further on the implementation of the resolutions of UNIA 5, we might come back to this issue to put forward some further considerations where we make a connection with the next presentation on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Netherlands, next on my list, I have Belgium, please. Welcome, Belgium.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I will be very short. I have some a pragmatic question and recommendation as well. As you know, and first of all, I also would like to thank the ED very much for her food for thought, her introduction to this part of the meeting. I think these really are issues we really should think about how to improve implementation of resolutions by connecting them better with the broader work of UNEP and the program of work emerging. So on the monitoring portal, I remember when we negotiated this resolution, it really meant as a tool to ease the work of UNEP and to streamline reporting and make it more easily available for member states and to keep the overview of all of the resolutions that are being adopted and follow up on progress of implementation. I think I can understand why it is so difficult for my colleague from the EU to access the portal, because I only can access it because I found a little trick to do it. I access it through the PaperSmart portal because there's a link there, and then I can access it. If I go directly through the link to the monitoring reporting tool, it's not possible for me either. So this is a very pragmatic observation. And so I think it's a very useful tool. It really gives a wealth of information on where you are. It's just a starting point. I take into account what you have said about projects to even improve it. But well, this is the first step. It has to be easily available to member states. And then so my recommendation would also be to have like on the homepage of UNEP to have a link that is easy to find for all member states, because now, to be frank, you can only find the portal if you know where to look. So I think that's something that could be solved very easily. So thank you very much.
I thank Belgium for your very interesting comments and questions. Next on my list, I have Switzerland. Please, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Many thanks to the Secretariat for all the work and for the very useful portal. I have to say that as a UNEP focal point, it helps me very much having a broad overview in a quick and efficient manner. You know, I understand all the access thing. I have to say also, to be fair with the Secretariat, but also with my colleague here in the room, I also had some difficulties, but then I asked assistance from the Secretariat, and in a few minutes, I had all the information I needed to access. But maybe going forward, maybe we could just ask the Secretariat if they could once more, I know you have done it already, but send it to member states with a link and how we could do it. And I'm sure this will be done after this meeting, so we can also discuss other issues. Also, our deep appreciation for the ED for being with us this afternoon. I think we very much agree with her that we also need to focus on solutions and find ways to improve the process, or maybe facilitate communication on the implementation of the resolution, including the funding. And this discussion is very much linked also to the relationship between the resolution and the program of work. I think it's also clear that for my delegation, we have now received, I think, as all other member states, received letters for almost all, if not all, resolutions. And it seems that there are funding gaps for almost all of them. And to be honest, we're not exactly sure how to go about this situation. One thing, and maybe it goes a little bit in the same direction as what the ED was saying, and sorry if I did not understand properly, but maybe it could be made clearer in those communication what elements of the resolution are part of the implementation of the work program and program budget, and what are new elements. Because, for example, and new elements that would not be covered, for example, by the environmental fund, and that would require specific extra budgetary funding. Because, for example, one of the resolution adopted at UNEA 5, GO7, I think this was clear that it was already part of the work program, its core work of UNEP. So we assume that this, and it seems to be the case, is part of the budget 22-23 going forward. But for example, if I take another example, if we look at the resolution on the sound management of chemicals and waste, there seem to be a huge funding gaps, but for us, it's not really clear because the resolution did not ask for many new elements. For example, we did not increase requests on the SciChem process, for example, or the special program. And it's not clear to us when we read the letter, which parts are part of the normal program of work and budget 22-23, and which would require special funding. And one last thing I wanted to say is technical notes in advance of UNEA resolution are a very important tool, including the budgetary estimations. And maybe we can also discuss going forward how to also make this clear on what is covered by the program of work, MTS, and what are new elements. But it's also very important, bearing in mind what the ED have said, that, you know, it's estimation, it cannot be like the full budget, because of course some elements remain unknown at the moment of when the technical notes are being written, but it's also important that it's somehow realistic. I think, for example, the ink process on plastic pollution was one of these cases where it was difficult for some delegations to understand how the budget could come from 15 million to 30 million. And even if the information we had were similar, you know, the facts were basically the same, one prep meeting, 5 ink, and a secretariat. And for us, it was difficult to understand how we could go from 15 to 30 million. And it's not only an administrative issue, it's because at that time we were already planning for budget. And I think it would also have helped the secretariat if member states were in a position to better prepare for the amount that in fact was needed. I will come back later this afternoon. I think we'll have time to discuss more thematic resolution, but I will stop there for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Have next to my list the Czech Republic, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to align ourselves with the statement of European Union and also with the remarks made by colleagues from the Netherlands, Belgium, and also thank you very much, colleague from Switzerland, for the good lines how to use the portal. We will. So I can skip this part of my statement. I will just add that maybe it would be good for the Secretariat to organize some learning sessions for the portal. That would be very useful to all delegations. Let me share with you some recommendations how to improve the process of reviewing the implementation of the UNEA resolutions. At this stage of implementation of the UNEA 5 resolutions, it might be useful for the overall implementation of Programme of Work 22-23 and Midterm Strategy 22-25 to have a clear affiliation or link of the UNIA 5 resolutions to the specific sub-programs and their outcomes with elaboration of performance indicators, targets, units of measure, data sources, as well as with financial requirements by funding sources, including human resources requirements by funding category. This can help not only with reviewing the process of implementation, but can be a motivation for the engagement of UNEP member states in implementation, including in funding. This might apply also to future negotiations, even at the stage of drafting them by the UNEP member states, with technical support of the Secretariat, and in particular at negotiation stage at CPR, OECPR, and at adoption at UNIA 6, as midterm strategy will be still valid in 2025, and the potential adoption of new resolution might be reflected in final negotiation of program of work and budget for 24-25. Let me share a few words with you regarding the resolution 5/11, enhancing circular economy as a contribution to achieving sustainable consumption and production. In the Czech Republic, we are already in the phase of implementing national strategy plans for circular economy, and we are ready to share our experience and findings with the UNEP member states, using also the platform of the Environment for Europe Batumi initiative. In the preparation of the key strategic document, Circular Czechia 2040, adopted at the end of 2021, we used consultations with national and international experts, including also OECD and the European Commission. The result is a comprehensive document which sets out 10 priority areas of circular economy on national level to ensure effective transition of the economy to the circular model until the year 2040. Thanks to the simultaneous implementation of this circular legislation, for example, the Single-Use Plastics Act or new law on waste, we can already see the positive outcomes of actions we take. There are numerous examples in research and science, policymaking, private sector and non-governmental organizations. It is still a long way to go before we reach a fully circular model, but I am not afraid to say that we have already made a few important steps forward in this endeavor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you very much, the Czech Republic, for your comments. Next on my list, I have Morocco, please. Morocco, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving my delegation the floor. And first of all, I would like to thank Madam Executive Director for her important remarks on this very agenda item. And we value as Member State her presence with us and her regular interactions with Member States in order to respond to their concerns and take stock of their suggestions. So thank you so much. My delegation would like also to thank the team of the Secretariat for the update provided on the status of implementation of UNIA resolution, including the resolutions adopted during UNIA 5. Starting with the portal issue, and I seize this opportunity to thank Madam Edie for letting us know that organizing training sessions as requested by the Africa Group is possible as per previous practice. My delegation has also experienced difficulties accessing the portal since it has been launched, and also, my delegation, which is based in the capital, has also the same trouble accessing the portal. Having this in mind, we know that maybe some delegates, as expressed here earlier, that they did sort out the problem by reaching out directly to the Secretariat, but it might be really difficult from delegations who are based in the capitals to do so. So my delegation would request from the Secretariat, if it is possible, to have those training sessions the soonest possible as we are heading towards UNIA 6, so as our teams from the capitals can have access to this portal and do the follow-up work on the different resolutions. And also, we know that it is going to be a useful tool for them when it comes to when they will be ready to upload their voluntary reports, etc. So if it is possible, we would like to have this done probably in the month of November, if it is possible, of course. And so I would like as well to touch upon the aspect of implementation. And we do value the explanations given by Her Excellency Madame ED on explaining about why we're having maybe some resolutions launched already. The process of implementation is launched already since they have been reflected in the MTS as well as in the program of work and budget, which make it easier. So we absolutely understand that. But on the other hand, we know that Secretariat can also do can also make efforts in reaching out to the mobilization resources. For mobilization of the resources for the implementation of those resolutions who were not projected actually in the program of work and budget. And so maybe the question to ask is what can maybe the Secretariat give us, because we know, for example, when we read the presentation, when it comes to the resolution, for example, on animal welfare, we know that the Secretariat had made already some efforts in order to secure some funding for the implementation for that particular resolution. But then it's not always easy because we know that it needs a lot of contact. It needs to identify the partners to be able to get those funding. Maybe we can have from time to time during the subcommittee meetings some updates on the efforts or the strategy that the Secretariat will be actually using in order to seek in those funds. And while awaiting the funds to come for the implementations of those resolutions, my delegation had supported the proposal that was made previously by the G77 plus China, as well as by the Africa Group, when it comes to the establishment of a matrix for the implementation of all UNIA resolution, and which has the advantage basically to keep those resolutions at the core of the work of the CPR and its subcommittees, and as a useful practical tool for the Secretariat, member states, and stakeholders to keep track of the developments on the process of their implementation, and in order not to forget about them. So we have requested, I believe this, during the previous subcommittees and CPR. We would like to have a reaction from the Secretariat with regard to these proposals from those two regional groups. And we know that portal is very useful, but we also want to have this kind of chart that will be also as a tool to have to keep track of those resolutions in order not to forget about them. And I think the Secretariat have used this kind of matrix when we were preparing for the UNIA resolutions, and they proved to be very, very useful when we were preparing for the negotiation of the resolutions. So we would like to use this model when it comes to the implementation of the resolution. So I think that will be it. And thank you so much for listening to us. And thank you very much for the presentations and for the response. Thank you.
We'll make a parenthesis. Right now, we know that you have to leave us, so we would like to give you the floor to make some comments on what you hear. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. I'm being pulled in many directions, but I will be back but I have to go to another thing that in 15 minutes. But this is very important for me to hear these comments, and I can see that there is at least one more country, and my colleagues will brief me on the additional comments that are coming in 2 more countries as I'm looking at it now. But just to say that the reason why we pushed out the portal is, of course, because it was requested in UNEA 4, but also because it's just good housekeeping. And so the questions and the asks that you have put on access, I mean, it's heard loud and clear. So this is something that shall be fixed. I hear you on having an easy on the portal entry where you land unep.org. There has to be a link. I hear you on a help desk kind of email that should be there. I can't get access. What do I do? So even if you are sitting in a different time zone or a different country, you should be able to press that from the capital. So let us just take this on board. This is very helpful feedback and obviously something that must be fixed expeditiously. I also very much understand the imperative of rolling out and having rolling training or familiarization or whatever the right appropriate word is, and recognizing, and I say this to my colleagues, that's a job that will never be done because new people will constantly come. And so that should be part and parcel of how we do it. So thank you for that feedback. It's superbly helpful. The portal, when you do finally find the magic key to get in, is actually really rather good. But obviously, if you're standing outside and banging on that door, that is only a cause for frustration. On the various issues that have been raised beyond access, which is clearly, I think there's some very helpful points from Morocco on the, updates, more regularized updates on funding. Again, in a comprehensive rather than a sliced and diced form would be helpful. But the reality is that some, while falling inside UNEP mandate, fall outside the program of work. And you, member states, have approved the budget for the program of work. And that ties my hands vis-a-vis my auditors that are appointed by member states. So there is a reality here that I put before you for subsequent, we can solve this. This is not impossible. As I said, we can put in the next program of work and budget an unallocated for unfunded resolution amount so that will be there. So I think there's solutions to this, but the reality is that the member states and the secretariat have never quite brought in sync resolutions, budget, and MTS. And that's something that we need to fix. There were a number of points that were raised by the distinguished delegate from Malawi. Most of those will be responded to by my colleague. But suffice is to say that on the biodiversity of health, I want to stress that there's hardly an issue that is more important when we look at that interlinkage. And I'm very happy that that resolution was indeed there. I think COVID taught us as a humanity an enormous amount of information and opportunity for proactively dealing with this. But the fact is also that the world was unprepared. And so the questions on assistance to member state, on awareness raising, I want to be very honest that we are all building skills in this space, from the WHO to FAO to member states to IOE or the World Animal Health Organization, and indeed ourselves, because the world was caught unprepared. But for us, the fact that we are now working very closely with our friends at WHO and FAO and World Animal Health Organization is a very important and critical first step. But there is still a long way to journey, and we are journeying that with our friends in the other organizations as well. But Mr. Castens will respond in greater detail. Similarly, on the circular economy, there were some specific questions on when the report will come out that will also be responded to. But I think it's just about being finalized. And I will say here that the moves that the African continent has made on the issue of of secondhand vehicles, for example, are significant. And one that we've seen ECOWAS already having and instituting Euro 4 import bar. We've seen that in a few other regional organizations, and we hope that others will follow through on the rest of the continent, because the Euro 4 standard should be the minimum for importing used vehicles, both for road safety, but also, of course, for emissions dimensions. I think it was very helpful to hear from the distinguished delegate from the Czech Republic on the domestic actions and lifts that are being made on circularity. As you rightly say, this is not easy, but something that will require continuous effort. And we salute those countries that are already leaning in on circularity, sustainable consumption and production, ensuring that that is something that is part and parcel of government program. To the distinguished delegate from Switzerland, thank you for the comments, as well as for telling us that we did respond, but we need to do it regularly and more with greater ease. But also you observe the funding gap for almost all resolutions. Indeed, therein lies the challenge. Therein lies the challenge that we're facing. You also observe how can we, when we only have very initial ideas of what a resolution will look like, get as close to the full cost as possible, probably referencing there the INC, where we did not realize there would be 5 sessions, etc. The complexity of how it then was finally decided. How can we get better at that? I think it lies in early dialogue, allowing the Secretariat inside, not to influence, but to understand what is the vision of member states as they confer on the drafting of these resolutions. Because if we don't have a little bit of a finger on the proverbial pulse, it is very hard for us then to gauge what the cost and the level of effort will be. Some resolutions and member state let us inside those conversations so that we could be better, and others, for whatever reasons, that was less feasible. We are here to support, not to influence or manipulate. So to the extent that we can be of help in this regard, that is what we would seek to do. With that, Mr. Chair, if I may hand it to my colleagues for the specific questions and answers.
Thank you very much. Tim, you have the floor, please. And thank you very much for your remarks, your answers, Madam Midi. Please, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the very good questions. I'll try not to repeat what the executive director has said, except to say that I appreciate very much getting all this information about accessibility to the portal, because my colleagues that work in the IT section are also in the room and listening very closely to the questions that are being raised and the problems of accessibility, and we will work on that immediately. On whether or not we provided this to the newcomers orientation session, we mentioned it, but we didn't provide a training session. But it's obvious that the training session is needed beyond newcomers, also importantly on access. So we will work immediately with the Governance Affairs Secretariat to ensure that we can provide dedicated training sessions to the upcoming CPR meeting. Let me respond to a few of the questions, and thank you very much, the representative Malawi, for the very detailed questions, and we appreciate you looking very closely at what we've been doing in this regard. First of all, on the issue of UNEA 5, Resolution 6 on biodiversity and health and the progress we have on paragraph 1 of that resolution. UNEP has joined now the quadripartite One Health Alliance, and we've contributed to the Alliance's joint plan of action. And the joint plan of action has provisions for the activities of paragraphs 1A through 1D. UNEP's Governance Affairs Office has also organized a webinar to brief members of the Committee of Permanent Representatives on the Joint Action Plan in June 2022. We contributed to a series of meetings and activities in the Asia and Pacific One Health Quadripartite Alliance Coordination Group, which contribute to activities of paragraphs 1A through D. The next step is to design the implementation framework for the joint plan of action. At a side event of the CBD COP, we will present objectives for the Nature and Health Trust Fund, and will respond to the requests listed above, and more specifically, raise awareness and foster new collaboration. We are participating in a joint scoping exercise looking at One Health information systems for better prevention, detection, surveillance, and response with the quadripartite One Health Alliance under the auspices of the G7 and G20, and a report is anticipated on that in early 2023. A couple of more still in this paragraph. UNEP has been participating as an observer and providing technical inputs to the WHO-led international negotiating body for the new pandemic treaty under negotiation to ensure that the environment dimensions are fully considered in this treaty. And finally, the full implementation of our work on One Health, including the action points under this resolution, will request significant capacity in-house. UNEP is in the process of creating the necessary staff positions, and we hope that this increased capacity will benefit the implementation of the activities that have been raised. On paragraph 2 of this same resolution, the One Health Alliance Joint Plan contains provisions to raise awareness on the linkages between biodiversity loss and disease, and also on the need to invest in nature and ecosystem services. The activity is also covered under the Nature for Health Multi-Donor Trust Fund, which has just been launched. It just launched its expression of interest and is currently reviewing proposals. As mentioned earlier, we are hosting side events to raise awareness on this at the CPD COP. Regarding Resolution 511, which is on enhancing the circular economy. We have three, in regards to, again, to the questions from Molly, the three main exporting markets of light duty vehicles are in the European Union, Japan, and the United States, South Korea being the fourth. UNEP is developing its first report on used vehicles. And this is upcoming. We need to provide a few more case studies in this, and it will soon be published. In regards to resolution, trying to keep track. Yes, 510 on green recovery. We come back to that one. Let me mention briefly the issue that was raised by Switzerland on resolution 5.7 for SICAM. It is a continuation of representation costs. The SICAM Secretariat is extra budgetary, and so there is a funding gap. We are looking now for 1 to 2 years of extra budgetary funding for staff and costs of the SICAM program of work until December 2023. Be happy to provide more detailed information on that resolution a bit later. And yes, on resolution 10 on green recovery, also response to Malawi's question, UNEP has been scaling up our support at global, regional, and national levels to deliver on the resolution's mandate and embedding a resilience framing to the green recovery support provided to make sure that member states' economic development and environmental objectives are not affected adversely by the rapidly deteriorating global macro outlook. At a national level, the work on the sustainable budgeting approach with the University of Oxford is, for example, helping to provide policymakers with the evidence base for identifying policy opportunities which can produce both economic development and environmental sustainability, and ensure that public finance is aligned in the most effective and efficient manner with sustainable, resilient, and inclusive post-COVID-19 recovery. It was recently endorsed in the official communique produced at the pre-COP27 meeting of the African Ministers of Finance, Economy, and the Environment. Let me respond to just a couple of other issues that were not related to access to the portal, because we very much have taken those issues on board. We are looking to see whether or not we can make the entire portal available to the public as it is. It is linked to some databases that are internal to UNEP, so we just need to see how we can make that happen. As noted, it is already on the UNEP Open Data Portal. And I think you shouldn't have as many problems to access that at least. But you can take a look there, but all the reports of the resolutions are there and that portal is open to the public. In response to the other question from the Netherlands on the information, whether or not we can provide additional information on how it's being used. As I mentioned, one of the improvements we want to make is on the analytics of use, and we can take a deeper look at how we can determine beyond just access to the portal as to whether or not what is being looked at and how we might be able to improve those particular aspects as well. To the Czech Republic, thank you very much as well. The comments already raised by the executive director. And we're very pleased to hear that you're implementing Resolution 511, and we look forward to any reports you can add to the portal once we provide you access so that you can upload your implementation as well. That's very helpful. And to Morocco, thank you very much for the very detailed comments and requests. We would like to take a further look at the requests that have come from regional groups in terms of providing a better basis for tracking the resolutions. What I would suggest is that we move toward these capacity building sessions and we present the portal in dedicated sessions of the CPR, that we could bring those comments to those meetings as well, so we can use those opportunities to not only inform how the portal works, but we can get more information from all of you as to how you would like the portal to be designed so that we can provide you with the information you need. And I take note of the ambassador from Algeria who mentioned in her opening remarks as well some comments about the portal, and we took note of that. And so we would like to use those continuing opportunities to make improvements on the portal. So, Mr. Chair, I think I've hopefully answered all the questions. If I've missed any, happy to go back. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Tim. We still have some other countries requesting for the floor. I would like to give the floor to them, and then we'll wrap up and continue with the next point of the agenda. So we have Indonesia, please. Indonesia, you are welcome, Danny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving the floor to our delegation. And I would also like to thank Madam Edie through Madam Sonia and Mr. Kasten for her very important remark. It is heartening to hear her assurance that there is no hierarchy among resolutions. There are no prioritization among resolutions. We really appreciate the remarks by Madam Edie, and we would kindly request that assurance from Madam Edie can also be translated into all forms of communication and engagement with member states. I think because that is something that we really feel that is very important from our side. Just to mention about communication, I have with me the document UNEP, Your Partner for People and Planet, and I believe this is the document that was also distributed during the latest induction program. And if you look into the document, page 25, when it highlights the year 2022, the UNEA 5.2, it mentions about the fifth resumed session of UNEA adopted 14 resolutions, among other, only mentioning several resolutions without even mentioning the titles of the other resolutions. For us, perhaps, who are already here for quite a while, we already know the message. But for person who read this document for the first time, it may create a different message. So this is something that we really want the Secretariat to take into consideration and take serious, consideration about this so that the message that was sent from the Secretariat really reflect what the assurance from Madam Edie just mentioned right now. That's just one example. I'm sure that colleagues from the Secretariat take a good note on this. And then I would also like to thank Mr. Kasten for the presentation of the portal. This is very important for us. Like some other delegation, my delegation also faced some difficulty in the beginning, but I would like to thank the colleague from the Secretariat who have helped me to access the portal. And I have seen the portal now. I'm able to look into all the resolutions and everything. And I have to say, this is a very good portal, a lot of information. Of course, for us, it's a bit difficult in the beginning to dwell into the details of the portal. So, if there is any familiarization session or training, etc., it's very much welcome. But I must reiterate, it's very good portal. I have to say, I really appreciate it. Another thing, just want to react on previous remarks on the technical notes on resolution. Madam Edie mentioned some about technical notes, and also I heard some other previous delegates also mentioned about technical notes. For us, technical notes on resolution 5 in UNEA 5.2 was very useful in terms of connecting the content of the resolution to the program of work, to the medium-term strategy, in the connection with previous UNEA resolutions, and connection to bigger context. Our delegation concern is only about the budget section in the technical notes, because in our opinion, in our view, it should not be there. The budget estimate should not be in the technical notes, because the technical notes was produced before the negotiation had taken place. And if you look into the rules of procedure, Rule 31, paragraph 2, it mentioned that the UNEA shall take into account the estimate referred to in paragraph 1 before adopting any proposal involving expenditure. Before adopting, so not before negotiating. And I think this practice also takes place in New York, where all resolutions were discussed in terms of substance first, and then the PBI aspect were discussed in Fifth Committee before it was taken to GA for adoption. And I recall during one of the evaluation session after UNEA, there were some questions about this budget. How come the budget differ from the first estimate to the last calculation? And of course, it happens because of the negotiation process. There are some additional paragraph being put into the text, or there are some paragraph that were taken out of the text, which bring budget implication. So the budget estimate in the technical note, in as much as it is useful to provide initial setting or initial estimate, but it also provides a false sense of certainty, because it was produced before the negotiation process, before the text was even debated among member states, which may amend the substance and may change the budget estimates. We have set this in the last annual the previous annual subcommittee, and we are saying this again in this year's annual subcommittee. We believe that the technical note is very important, very useful, but not on the budget estimates, because again, just want to reiterate, it creates a false sense of certainty about the budget estimate about that particular resolution. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity, and I apologize for taking the floor a bit longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Indonesia. Next on my list of speakers is Peru, Brazil, then Netherlands. So we'll continue with Peru, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Since it is the first time my delegation takes the floor, I would like to start by thanking the Executive Director and the Secretariat for organizing this meeting, preparing the working documents, and allowing such broad participation. As a country rich in biological diversity and highly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, as well as to the ever-growing problem of pollution, Peru is fully committed with the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the MEAs, and UNEA resolutions. On this particular agenda item, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the very informative remarks and background documents. Peru takes note with appreciation the advances made on the implementation of UNEA 5 resolutions, especially of Resolution 514 on plastic pollution. Peru, as a nominated member of the INC Bureau, reaffirms its commitment to be an active actor and facilitator during the negotiations of the future legally binding instrument. My delegation looks forward to the first session of the INC and the multi-stakeholder forum at Punta del Este in 1 month. Peru is convinced that the treaty must be as ambitious as possible with a robust institutional framework and equally ambitious means of implementation. During the first session of the INC, the elaboration of the international treaty should remain the primary focus and should prioritize advancing of substantial issues as much as possible. Furthermore, Peru notices with optimism the significant advances made on the implementation of other UNEA resolutions, including the establishment of the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution, nature-based solutions for supporting sustainable development, and the Global Environment Outlook process. To conclude, I would like to point out that the planned training sessions and dissemination work of the use of the UNEA monitoring and reporting portal will be incredibly useful for delegations and for experts from capitals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Peru. Next on my list is Brazil. You are welcome, Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to all. Firstly, I'd like to make my comments on the presentation on the portal, which was very useful. In all fairness to the Secretariat, we had received a complete user manual, but in the lead up to UNEA, and perhaps that's why the information was lost, because we were negotiating so many resolutions back then. But it's very good to have this presentation again, and it will be very helpful as we move forward. Mr. Chair, the Secretariat has provided us over the past days with lots of information and updates on the resolutions. We have received many letters, and we would like to respond to them substantively. So starting with Resolution 5/11 on enhancing circular economy as a contribution to achieving sustainable consumption and production, we would like to reiterate, as before, the importance of respecting the spirit embedded in the text, which recognizes multiple pathways to sustainable consumption and production. And indeed, here I'd like to digress that this diversity of methods was acknowledged in the Global Strategy for Sustainable Consumption and Production 2023-2030, which was recently approved by the board of the 10 YPF-FP. And I'd like to point out to a specific paragraph of this global strategy, which clearly acknowledges the benefits and importance of bioeconomy, recognizing that the sustainable management and use of biodiversity resources and related services not only lead to the conservation and restoration of natural ecosystems, adds value to biodiversity-based products and services, but also contributes to the social and economic inclusion of often excluded local and indigenous communities in sustainable and innovative business models. We believe this is an important step as we tread different pathways for SCP. On Resolution 5/10, we recall that the original title, Green Recovery, was consensually modified to, and I quote, the environmental dimension of a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive post-COVID-19 recovery, end of quote. That decision resulted from the understanding that recovery after COVID-19 undoubtedly has to take into consideration the socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic. This understanding could not be adequately conveyed by the expression, for instance, green recovery, and we would expect the Secretariat to be guided by this UNEA resolution in its further communications. On UNEA Resolution 5/6 on biodiversity and health, we have seen the interest raised in this plenary by other delegations because there have been lots of recent developments, such as UNEP joining the Quadripartite Alliance for One Health and the elaboration of the Alliance's joint plan of action. Nevertheless, we do realize that no consultation has taken place with the CPR. We do understand that there was a seminar of an informative nature, multi-stakeholder, organized outside the setting of the CPR, but we do encourage the Secretariat to have a more formal consultation with the permanent representatives. On Resolution 5/5, on nature-based solutions for sustainable development, we do look forward to the intergovernmental consultations to support its implementation. Bear in mind that the resolution presents an agreed definition. We deem it of utmost importance to align any preceding criteria, standards, or guidelines with the concept reached by consensus for adequate implementation. Furthermore, considering UNEP's widespread use of this concept under the efforts of climate change, we deem it useful to recall the resolution's guidance that NBS do not replace the need for rapid, deep, and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, on Resolution 5/13, entitled Due Regard to the Principle of Equitable Geographical Distribution, in accordance with paragraph 3 of Article 101 of the Charter of the UN, we notice a focus on what is reported as the Young Talent Pipeline Initiative. While we do applaud this initiative, we deem it also important to understand which efforts have been undertaken by the Secretariat regarding more senior positions. For instance, are there any vacancies on the coming years of 2022, 2023? And is the Secretariat planning to make replacements in light of the principle of equitable geographical distribution? And with that, I conclude, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to Brazil for your comments. I have the Netherlands now, please.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. I assumed we would have another presentation, but I guess that the answers that were provided to our colleague from Malawi captured most of that presentation. So that is why I indicated that we would come back, but we also have a gentleman's agreement that we would not go before our colleague from the EU, noting that she also has requested for the floor. If you can confirm that we will not have another presentation under this agenda item, I will pull back and then come in later when our colleague has made her intervention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Certainly you can come back later on. Now, next on my list, I have Norway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. I would also like to thank the ED. Unfortunately, she left before I could thank her directly, but we appreciated very much her remarks. We thought they were very pertinent. In particular, her remarks about how some resolutions carry, I think what the expression she used was that some resolutions have a heavier footprint, but that should not be interpreted as any indication of hierarchy between different resolutions. Let me also thank the Secretariat for providing us with detailed updates on the implementation of UNEA outcomes, both in writing and in briefings. And we would also like to take this opportunity to thank the ED and the Secretariat for their efforts in advancing all outcomes from UNEA 5 as well as from previous assemblies. Regarding the letters that were mentioned or referred to earlier today by Switzerland, we would like to, and others, we would like to support the comments made by Switzerland. We had some of the same questions. We found the letters very useful. We appreciated the ED's comments about the timing of the letters, but we do note that it would have been helpful if they had been distributed a bit earlier to allow member states to properly review them before the start of our meeting this week. As a general comment, and also with regard to what other ties up with what other delegations have said, let us recall that there are many factors that lead to some resolutions gaining more ground than others, and acquiring resources are still recognized by all as highly relevant, as we have heard today. And that is why we urge more funding and more flexible funding to UNEP from more donors. We look forward to the opportunity to discuss financial issues more in detail tomorrow under the agenda item 7. We very much welcome progress that has been made towards the establishment of a science policy panel, which seems to be on track. We would like to underline the important role played by the Secretariat so far, and that your work on the panel must continue in a clearly prioritized way. The adoption of Resolution 5/5 on nature-based solutions was an important achievement that we believe will strengthen the focus on an important area of work. It is now of broad interest to be informed about how UNEP is working to ensure effective follow-up, not least at COP27 and COP15. We should all make sure our negotiators place an emphasis on the UNEA nature-based solution agreement at these important meetings. Finally, we have already commended the important work UNEP is doing to support the work on the Global Plastics Agreement and the preparations of the first negotiating meeting in Uruguay next month. Norway is committed to securing a successful outcome and would once again like to encourage other member states to join the high ambition coalition, which we co-lead with Rwanda. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Norway. Next on my list is the EU, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And somehow we felt there was a little bit of confusion, so apologies for that. We somewhat really expected another presentation on implementation of resolutions, as this was the title of the agenda item, and we felt it was not sufficient only to have presentation on the portal, because in the end we are in the main meeting of the year for the oversight. But let me continue with the general comments, which I would like to make on behalf of the European Union and its member states. So first, we do echo all other colleagues who say that all the resolutions have to be treated equally, but at the same time, we also agree with those who say that resolutions are very different in nature and they require different timelines and resources for implementation. And this also probably means that they can't be all implemented at the same time. We also welcome the most recent information provided to us by the letters of Executive Director And of course, we also appreciate the previous briefings on the implementation of some of the resolutions, like on plastics, on geo, on nitrogen, which we heard before. This did allow member states to share initial views on the progress achieved on individual resolutions. We also hear very loudly the concern on lack of funding and implementation of all 14 resolutions, and we would like to continue encouraging all member states to contribute to their implementation depending on their capacities and priorities. But we also very much support the questions from Switzerland on which ask how UNEP arrives to these quite big funding gaps, and any additional information on how these estimates were done would be most appreciated. And then a few more questions. So as I said, we would be very interested to hear like a couple of slides of presentation showing how resolutions fit with certain subprograms of MTS, because some of them indeed fall within relevant subprograms. But maybe this is a lesson for us, all of us, for the future. And this is why we provide some recommendations, which we hope will be taken into account for the future negotiations and also presentation of progress of implementation. So 3 points on that. First, for the next time, would be good to have a very clear state of play on all existing resolutions. If they replace any obsolete resolutions which have been implemented before, or are these completely new ones. Would also like to see preliminary implementation plans for new resolutions. These plans should indicate how new resolutions would link with the program of work, and they also should be accompanied by resource mobilization plan, including which financial and human resources are expected and which are already available. And of course, these preliminary plans, or maybe even the technical notes that Secretariat usually prepares, they could also reflect what are expected partners for implementation of those resolutions. We believe this information would allow member states to assess during the negotiations on resolutions the potential for them to get involved in implementation. And this also would help Secretariat to better plan the budget and implementation, also relying on the Environment Fund and the GEF and all the voluntary earmarked and non-earmarked contributions. We also trust that this could lead to real adoption of most relevant and impactful resolutions, and perhaps even help us to manage the amount of resolutions that we see tabled for each assembly. And just to conclude with very general remarks, we believe that implementation of all these 14 resolutions that we have in front of us will really help us and bring inspirational impetus into the UN Water Conference in 2023. The SDG Summit also planned for next year, and also for future COPs and for SDG implementation. So also we look forward to see what synergies and how they are developed with these processes. And once again, finally, we recall the importance of applying integrated approach when implementing these resolutions to ensure effective use of financial and human resources. It's important to avoid duplications when implementing subprograms and projects under those subprograms, and seek more coordination and complementarity between projects implemented at regional and country levels. I thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, you. I'd like to say that before giving the floor to the next speaker, I wanted to indicate that the updates to resolutions and decisions has been provided in the context of the portal reflecting information as of June 2022. And supplementary information on UNEA 5 resolutions and decisions since June 2022 has been made available in the background document under this item. So with this, I'd like to give the floor to Cuba, please. Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. The Cuban delegation wishes to draw attention to the adoption of decisions that require financial support for their implementation. Most of that funding depends on voluntary contributions. So we think that while these decisions respond to real problems, and we agree, Membership should be more aware of the need to set priorities and on this basis adopt decisions. On the other hand, we would like to stress that in our point of view, it has been very useful and good that the 10-year framework strategy for sustainable production and consumption until 2030 has been approved. Cuba attaches great importance to this issue, which is the main cause of the problems that world faces today and of the triple crisis that the planet is experiencing, which have their origin in unsustainable consumption and production patterns. If we manage to make progress on these issues, the other problems that we face today will be solved gradually. So let us concentrate efforts and also resources, of course, in this direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Cuba. Next on my list speakers, I have the Russian Federation. Please, you have the floor, Russia.
Thank you, Chair. There were a lot of constructive comments among member states today. I would also like to make some general remarks. I'll try to be brief. The ED said that there is no hierarchy in the implementation of resolutions. We take note of that. At the same time, the Russian Federation would like to highlight the fact that the implementation of the UNEA 6 resolutions seems to be, UNEA resolution seems to be very unbalanced, and seems that the main efforts of the Secretariat are concentrated on certain decisions, leaving others behind. We hope that the Secretariat will not simply turn a blind eye to documents that are of primary importance to developing states. We also do not see any practical progress on the implementation of the UNEA resolution on equitable geographical representation in the Secretariat of UNEP. This is why we call upon the Secretariat to take necessary actions in order to try to balance the implementations of UNEA resolutions, giving equal attention to each and every document. And a few words concerning the portal. First of all, thank you for the presentation. And there's one small proposition. Maybe the Secretariat can send to member states the exact instructions with step-by-step actions on how to get access to this important instrument. Thank you.
I thank the Russian Federation for your comments. Next on my list of speakers, I have Switzerland, please. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And we believe it is undisputed that all resolutions approved at UNEA 5.2 needs to be implemented. But I think also echoing what the European Union said, it's also a fact that the resolutions are also very different in nature. And we cannot accept that they would advance at the same time or require the same type of resources or processes. It's one thing to implement a resolution on circular economy, which has also different processes. It is another to set up, for example, an intergovernmental negotiating committee. Having said this, let me share a few thoughts on some of the resolution following the numbering of the resolution and not indicating a particular hierarchy in terms of interests or priorities for Switzerland. Concerning resolution 5.4 on sustainable lake management, we had a question because it seemed that in the recent letter we received from the ED, there's a mention of UNEP's intention to create a knowledge hub on lake management research. And we would be interested in having a bit more information, as we didn't believe that this was requested through the resolution. We also want to recall that the resolution stresses the importance of coordination with relevant convention. So we believe it's also very important that UNEP works closely with, for example, the Global Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. We also believe that the close cooperation would allow for a cost-efficient way of working, and also making sure that the UNEA resolution could be implemented using some existing resources and expertise. Moving on now to the resolution 5.8 on science policy panel. We first want to thank the Secretariat for their hard work in setting up the process. We believe it's very positive how relevant stakeholders, such as the WHO and other organizations, reacted to the resolution and are ready to engage the process. It's very important that we keep this momentum. And it's also a unique opportunity to link the two clusters from environmental and health. We were very happy that the process has been launched at the open-ended working group 1.1. But we very much regret the unprecedented case that the election of the chair was blocked due to political reason, while it was clear that the qualification of the candidates were undisputed. So we very much count on the support of UNEP to ensure that the elections of the chair and the remaining bureau members can be achieved promptly at the OEWG 1.2 in Bangkok. On resolution 5.11 on circular economy, I think it's also clear that the way we extract, process, consume, and dispose resources are at the root of the triple planetary crisis. We very much expect this resolution to support action towards a more sustainable management of resources. And we also very much look forward to the next global resource outlook that will be launched at the next UNEA in 2024. We also want to point out to the important work of GACERE, which is also which will also be important in the implementation of this resolution. And finally, but not less importantly, we very much welcome the decision of the board of the 10YFP to approve the global strategy. And we really hope that this will push for a better mainstreaming also throughout the UN system to make sure that we move towards more sustainable consumption and production. And we believe that the strategy is fully in line with the resolution and will also support its implementation. Now moving to resolution 5.12 on minerals and metals management. Switzerland wants to express its appreciation also to the Secretariat. We welcome the implementation plans for this resolution. And we think that this resolution going forward and its implementation will also contribute to the energy transition and more globally to achieving the SDGs. We are of the view that the ideal format for regional meetings that are foreseen would be in person, as it would also foster more dynamic and informal exchanges. In that regard, we hope that there will be further expression of interest to host such regional meetings. For Switzerland, and we're very pleased that UNEP plans to organize the global intergovernmental meetings on minerals in Geneva, and we stand ready to support UNEP in this endeavor. On this resolution, we also want to mention that in response to the letter by the ED, Switzerland has expressed its interest to co-chair the regional consultation, and the communication will follow shortly. We also will appoint a focal point for this process, and we would very much encourage delegation to also nominate focal points for this process, as this would also enhance communication and facilitate the implementation of the process. We're very much looking forward to engaging with all member states towards an ambitious outcome. And finally, but not less importantly, on resolution 5.14 on ending plastic pollution, just a word to express our appreciation first to the ecosystem division and to Susan and Leticia for the outstanding work before UNEA and also for preparing the OEWG in Dakar. And also now our thanks and congratulations to Jyoti for heading the INC Secretariat and for the important work ahead. We believe that going forward in this process, it would be very important to use synergies and enhance cooperation with all relevant actors such as WTO, WHO, ILO, and MEA Secretariat. And we recall once more the importance of not working in silo. We also want to congratulate and thank Uruguay for hosting the first negotiation round in Uruguay, and we're very happy that Switzerland was able to support them. I will end here. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Next on my list is Canada. Please, Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to join others in appreciating the presentation on the portal and the reflections from the Executive Director on the resolutions. For the portal, it is indeed very useful as a tool to have a one-window approach. And further to comments on the treatment of UNEA resolutions, of course, we support equal treatment with the consideration that implementation depends very much on the availability of resources, as many have said, and which has obviously impacts on the operationalization. I'd like to pick up on the comments by Switzerland, Czechia, and the EU. And speaking of budget, it would indeed be quite useful to have a little bit more disaggregated information on how much of the resolutions implementation will be addressed from the program of work that is ongoing, and how much more budget is necessary. And that would go a long way to help member states better understand and also manage expectations. We'd like to thank for the document outlining updates on all the UNEA 5 resolutions, and we too acknowledged letters sent by the ED to ministers. Allow me to make a few points on some of the resolutions. On the NBS, nature-based solution, we are committed to continue working with all partners to engage productively in these discussions that were launched actually not too long ago. And this year, we keep witnessing in some fora the ongoing disregard by some of the NBS resolution, including the definition previously agreed to at UNEA. And we'd like to caution that this sets a bit of a dangerous precedent and risk undermining negotiations of future resolutions here at UNEP for UNEA, but also at UNGA and other fora. We very much look forward to sharing knowledge and experiences in supporting nature-based solutions and learning from fellow member states and partners. And we note, importantly, the critical knowledge and contributions of indigenous peoples in this regard. On the Science Policy Panel resolution, we are excited by the creation of the new SPP, and we thank the work that has been ongoing so far. The panel should focus really on the policy challenges that are emerging, uncertain, and multidisciplinary, related to sound management of chemicals, waste, and pollution that are not addressed in other fora. And it is very important to have meaningful engagement and interdisciplinary engagement which represent a diversity of expertise, and again, the participation of indigenous peoples. On plastic, my delegation is pleased with the progress. Look forward to the INC1, and we stand ready to work with others to develop an ambitious legally binding agreement on plastics. And I will be brief, two more things. On the GEO resolution, we very much thank the hosting of those two recent productive meetings on the procedures and the scope. We would like to caution against an expanding scope of GEO7, given the finite resources and time constraints. And we're pleased to have a Canadian expert on the intergovernmental and multi-stakeholder advisory group. And lastly, responding to the calls for focal points, we're happy to have identified one for the minerals and metals resolution. Looking forward to engage on that, and we'll soon finalize our identification of a focal point for the nitrogen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Canada, for your comments. Next on my list is the UK, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to start by joining others in thanking the Secretariat for their presentation and for their ongoing work on implementing the outcomes of UNEA, and also for the remarks made by the Executive Director at the start of the session, which felt like very helpful context setting for us all, and as others have signalled, gives us helpful food for thought too. I'll make some specific comments on some of the resolutions. So first, in relation to implementation of the resolution on the Science Policy Panel, we're grateful to the Secretariat for their organisation of the OEWG 1.1, and we're looking forward to the meeting in Bangkok next year. We think it's important to continue to seek to complete our work by the end of 2024, and we'd ask that member states be as flexible and as agile as possible in their approaches to the work to help us keep to that timetable. We thank those member states who have already made contributions to the budget for this process and encourage those who are looking to do so to make contributions as soon as possible, which will be crucial to enable us to maintain the positive momentum that we've created in this process and ensure its eventual success. In relation to the resolution on ending plastic pollution, we're grateful to the Secretariat and to Uruguay for their swift work in preparing for the first INC meeting due to take place at the end of November. We do have some concerns that a Bureau chair has not yet been agreed, and we hope that those countries that have put forward nominations can come to an agreement soon. In relation to the implementation of the resolution on nature-based solutions, we believe this is a critically important outcome from UNEA 5.2, and we look forward to engaging in the intergovernmental consultations that the resolution calls for. And we welcome also the recent nomination of co-facilitators for this process and look forward to engaging further as the implementation of this resolution is accelerated. And then finally, in relation to the implementation of the resolution on animal welfare, environment and sustainable development nexus, it would be helpful to understand how the funding requirements for this particular resolution have been established, and perhaps seeing a breakdown of those of the funding requirements would be helpful in that sense. And the letter circulated over the weekend at the beginning of this week mentions that other options are being explored in relation to implementation of this resolution, and it would be helpful to understand what those are too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, UK. Next on my list is Finland. You have the floor. Well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to make this statement on behalf of Finland. Thank you very much for this presentation, Director Tim Kasten. And as this is the first time we're taking the floor in this meeting, I'd like to join others in expressing our appreciation to the Secretariat for all the hard work and everything, the preparations that has gone into the background documents and preparations for this meeting. Finland aligns itself with the statement made by the EU and its member states. We consider that UNEA 5.2 approved a number of very important resolutions, especially to mention the one on initiating negotiations to develop an international agreement to end plastic pollution. We'd also like to support and echo the comments made by many colleagues, such as Belgium and Switzerland, Czech and Netherlands, under this agenda item. We underline that it would be very useful to increase the linkages between implementation of UNEA resolutions with the implementation of UNEP's program of work and budget. To that end, we would welcome further analysis on their alignment. Finland would be pleased to hear UNEP's analysis on key issues and possible recommendations for further streamlining and improving the linkages between resolutions and POW implementation. We already take good note of the ED's initial reflections at the beginning of this session, and we thank her for her proposal for member states to consider including an undetermined sum in POW to provide seed funding for those resolutions that are not covered by the program of work. We are happy to consider this and other proposals to strengthen the linkages. We also find the analysis by UNEP on each UNEA resolution, including budget estimates, very useful and encourage UNEP to continue preparing those also in future UNEAs. As a last point, our thanks for the helpful presentation on the monitoring and reporting portal. Our delegation has also experienced, unfortunately, some challenges in accessing, and we'd welcome a more user-friendly solution. To conclude, Finland looks forward to continued close collaboration with UNEP as we proceed in the implementation of these important resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Finland. I have next on my list the United States, please. You have the floor, sir. United States.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is grateful to the Executive Director for her opening remarks during this session. UNEP's success to meet its mission focused on pollution and waste, nature and biodiversity loss, and climate change is fundamental and important to the United States. Thank you for the presentation on the portal. Unfortunately, we are also unable to access the portal because our official emails are not recognized by the UN tenant system. I'm not really sure what that means, but that's the error message we're receiving. We look forward to reviewing the portal when these technical issues are resolved. Hopefully it is a quick resolution, although it was a very long error message. Member states agreed to a robust and unprecedented set of resolutions at UNEA 5.2. Along with all member states, the United States supported these resolutions. We recognize that this is an ambitious agenda, and therefore the United States has significantly increased its contributions to UNEP across several funding mechanisms. Ultimately, however, success will not be measured by the number of resolutions, but by the ability to implement those resolutions to support and benefit countries north, south, east, and west. In any organization, if ambition exceeds its capacity to deliver, then it would lead first to disappointment and then to failure, which is an outcome no one wants. Therefore, we must work together to find a positive way forward. Establishing mechanisms to better link the program work and budget with outcomes from the UNEA processes, as suggested by the Executive Director and the Secretariat, is productive and should be considered. In addition, the suggestion of matching expectations for work with costs, existing efforts and resources, and the demands of desired outcomes is also important to consider. As the Executive Director noted, there is no hierarchy among the resolutions, but as she also noted, the resolutions differ in their needs. Some resolutions require more expensive investments, some have longer time horizons, and some fit more neatly into the approved UNEP program of work and budget. Perhaps both the Secretariat and member states need some self-reflection to identify better ways forward. Doing so will require work within the CPR, among the joint bureaus, and before and during UNEA itself. Work also needs to be done by member states outside this conference room, individually and in concert with others, to conceive and formulate their proposals in ways that fit as much as possible with the UNEP program of work. That said, the United States is grateful to the Secretariat team for the yeoman's effort to move forward on the resolutions. Is the Secretariat planning presentations during this agenda item on each resolution? I'm asking because we are under the impression that you will. The United States appreciates the letters on the resolutions. We are also concerned by the funding gaps that have been identified, and we would also like additional clarification on the disaggregation, as others have also outlined. As the letters have requested, we are working on our next steps. We do have comments and questions on individual resolutions that I would like to run through quickly. On Resolution 5.1, Animal Welfare, we welcome further dialogue on this topic to explore avenues for progress, especially pertaining to promotion of the One Health approach and preventing zoonotic disease emergence and spillover. We encourage the Friends group related to this resolution to engage experts associated with the quadripartite in order to leverage existing partnerships and capacity. With regard to Resolution 5.3, we appreciate the robust, on the GEO process, we appreciate the robust efforts to get GEO 7 underway. We look forward to UNEP's efforts to keep the status and trends of the environment under review. We look forward to seeing the call for the scientific expert group and hope to help UNEP identify experts to contribute to this process. Specific to Resolution 55 on nature-based solutions, we thank the Secretariat for the updates on this process. We're excited to see implementation get underway. The United States strongly supports the UNEA nature-based solutions resolution, and we are strongly committed to mainstreaming and implementing of NBS. As part of President Biden's executive order on tackling the climate crisis, nature-based solutions were identified as integral part of how the United States will work to combat the biodiversity and climate crises at home and abroad. We strongly support efforts to convene these intergovernmental consultations in an inclusive and regionally balanced manner, and we support encouraging the participation of developing countries and relevant partners and stakeholders. We are encouraged that good candidates are being put forward as co-chairs, and we stand ready to support them in their work. Specific to Resolution 511 on circular economy, we look forward to continued implementation of UNEA Resolution 511. We congratulate the Secretariat for the UNEP 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, and welcome the global strategy recently adopted by the board of the 10YFP. Among the diverse ways that this global strategy will advance the implementation of the resolution, we particularly welcome the multilateral and multi-stakeholder dialogue on sustainable consumption and production, proposed under the aegis of UNEA under the strategy's Pillar 4. We note from the Executive Director's letter circulated on Friday that the call in operating paragraph 10 of Resolution 511 to facilitate a conversation on natural resources and materials in the context of circular economy is being pursued by engagement through both the 10YFP and through the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. We would appreciate some better clarity on the value of running these two processes concurrently and how UNEP intends to ensure non-duplication, complementarity, and cost effectiveness. On Resolution 514 on ending plastic pollution, we greatly appreciate the hard work of the Secretariat in preparing for the start of this process, especially with the tight time frame. We urge the Secretariat to make these meetings as cost-effective as possible, since the estimated costs have increased substantially in the past 6 months. We also encourage UNEP to ensure that the upcoming multi-stakeholder forum and overall multi-stakeholder engagement is robust and effective. National governments cannot solve plastic pollution alone, and we need to hear from stakeholders about their ideas for working together. We look forward to working with the countries and the Secretariat ahead of and at INC1 to ensure that we continue the progress we started at UNEA. We need to nominate the Bureau and identify the chair as quickly as possible. With that, and in the interest of time, thank you for your patience. We have comments on the other resolutions that we will take up directly with the Secretariat team. And thank you, Chair, for your time.
I thank you, United States, for your comments. Certainly, the Secretariat has taken note of them. You made several questions, which I hope that they will be answering soon. I have the Netherlands next on my list, please. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now it's time for me to say that I will align my statement with the comments that were made by the European Union. But also from our side, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the presentation of the monitoring and reporting tool, and also for their responses to the questions that were raised in the earlier round of comments. We recognize that the most important purpose of this agenda item is to provide guidance to the Secretariat on the status of implementation of the resolutions, but also in the context of the program of work. We would like to share the following observations and recommendations. First of all, on the monitoring and reporting tool, taking into account that the discussion that we had earlier this afternoon, we would like to recommend the Secretariat to consider to enable an easy to find entry point to access the portal, but also to ensure public access to the information in the portal that is publicly available, or available. So we don't have all these problems with getting access to the tool, but also to make sure a wide as possible community can have access to the work that UNEP is doing for all of us, in our opinion. On the status of implementation of resolutions, we acknowledge that all resolutions need to be treated equally as requested by several other member states. However, we also recognize, as we indicated in our introductory remarks, that they are different in nature and require different types of follow-up actions by UNEP in order to deliver. And that was also confirmed by the executive director, and we would like to further echo what was said by Switzerland and the US in this regard. We take note that for some resolutions, funding is still being, or initial funding is still being sought, and we have heard the suggestion of the executive director on how to approach the funding cap, besides the letters that have been sent to member states and the outreach that has been done. However, before we consider this as a solution, we believe there are other ways that we also need to address, including looking critically to the way we prepare for the resolutions to be adopted at UNEA. We realize that part of the issue related to the funding caps reported to this meeting is also related to our own discipline in the negotiations on resolutions, and taking into account the program of work and budget when we table and discuss the draft resolutions, as well as the potential extra budgetary implications. We therefore align with those member states and the Secretariat that reiterated the need for further reflections on this issue, including on the importance of the Secretariat technical note when we are negotiating resolutions, and also on the usefulness of the estimated program budget indications in that note, though we may want to consider on how we can use this information in the process in a more useful manner. We emphasize that many resolutions contain elements that provide an opportunity to be integrated into the program of work and budget, as illustrated by our colleague from Switzerland. And also, like our colleague from Switzerland, we would have appreciated a more comprehensive overview on what elements of the resolutions are integrated in and contribute to the delivery of the program of work and other work that UNEP is engaged with. We are concerned that it seems that new resolutions are treated as a new program or new project activity, while it was envisioned in quite a few resolutions that they should contribute to UNEP's program of work to the extent possible, and that the program of work, as we have approved it, also provides flexibility to do so. Furthermore, we note that for the sake of this discussion, we would have benefited from a more comprehensive overarching note together with the information provided of what that would identify the key issues for us to discuss, following an analysis of the main challenges, opportunities, lessons learned identified, as well as recommendations on how to move forward. For example, the recommendation that, or the suggestion that was provided to this meeting by the executive director could have met with much more thought through responses from member states if we would have heard such a recommendation or suggestion in advance of the meeting. We therefore recommend that the Secretariat is requested in its endeavor to further monitor and implement all relevant UNEA outcomes to further streamline them as much as possible in the program of work, making use of the expertise and activities as well as availability of funding in different parts of the organization, update the information in the monitoring and reporting tool in a more disaggregated manner on which elements of the resolutions relate to the program of work, and making sure, as we said earlier, that the tool is better accessible, and that for future briefings on the status of implementation, the key issues for discussion and recommendations are provided to the meeting following an analysis on the key challenges, opportunities, and lessons learned. In our view, this would also provide an opportunity to address some of the funding gaps that have been highlighted in the meeting. To provide some further examples of areas and elements of resolutions where we see that linkages between resolutions and other activities by UNEP can be strengthened, we would like to refer to the link between the resolution on circular economy and the 10YFP. In that regard, we welcome the decision of the board of the 10YFP that approved a global strategy for sustainable consumption and production. That was following a consultative process where member states and stakeholders were participating. We would like to recommend to invite the executive director and UNEP to support the efforts of implementation together with other UN agencies, noting that it fits quite well with the resolution on circular economy, and including on the 4 priority actions that are identified in the 10YFP to position sustainable consumption and production as an essential requirement and means to achieve the global commitments for sustainable development, climate, biodiversity, and pollution, to enable change through circularity and transformative multi-stakeholder partnerships, to support member states in developing, in particular in developing countries in collaboration with other UN agencies and international financial institutes, to mainstream and implement SCP further in their development plans, and also to support the development of a more global movement and commitments for action based on science information coming from UNEP, amongst others. On the future of GEO, to ensure that on the resolution on the future of GEO, to ensure that the scientific work that is relevant in the different divisions that is in the different divisions is taken into account, and that the GEO process can benefit from the relevant expertise available in the organization at large. Furthermore, we would like to request that due attention be paid to provide capacity building within the GEO process on monitoring, data management, and analysis in line with the resolution from UNEA 4/23. In this regard, we also see scope to ensure that the data strategy and the World Environment Situation Room can benefit at large from the GEO process and vice versa. And we recommend to request the Secretary to make sure that these different processes are well streamlined and optimized with a view to deliver to the extent possible. On the resolution on sustainable nitrogen management, to make a link with the global partnership on marine litter and nutrient, the GPML, as well as ensuring that the scientific work is embedded in the ongoing processes of relevant assessments, including the Science Policy Panel and the GEO, where this is relevant. We won't be taking time for you at this meeting to provide further detailed comments on other resolutions, but we just wanted to illustrate that there is scope for further streamlining the work under the resolution and the program of work and budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netherlands. Given the time dedicated to this item of the agenda, I'd like to see whether we can close the list of speakers here with 2 more countries I have on the list to go to major groups. And then I would like to request comments and response to many questions posed by delegations during all this very rich discussion. So next on my list of speakers, I have Costa Rica, please. You have the floor, Costa Rica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Costa Rica welcomes the inputs presented by Madame Edy and the Secretariat concerning the portal and resolutions. In this regard, we would like to refer to the implementation of the outcomes of UNEA in the context of the program of work and the budget for 2022-2023. We wish to state that it is vital to recognize the unsustainable patterns of consumption and production which are overburdening the Earth's resources, and welcomes UNEP to continue working to strengthen the United Nations Development System reform through increased access and use of environmental data, and ensuring that the digital revolution helps deliver, not hinder, the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda. Costa Rica fully supports UNEP's pursuit of collective action on environmental sustainability, resilience, and environmental risk across all aspects of the Charter of the United Nations, including peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development within the scope of its mandate, to develop a common and coherent approach to integrating biodiversity and nature-based solutions for sustainable development into the United Nations policy and program planning and delivery. Costa Rica also welcomes the work of the 7 UNEP's sub-programs, which will support, accelerate, and scale up a shift to sustainable consumption and production patterns to achieve planetary sustainability for people, prosperity, and equity. Furthermore, the implementation of these actions, supported by the policies, tools, and methods developed through the enabling and sectoral programs of the 10YFP, One Planet Network, the UNEP Finance Initiative, the Partnership for Action on Green Economy, and other initiatives will enable the transition to inclusive green economies. In addition, Costa Rica's delegation enthusiastically welcomes last week's approval of the Global Strategy for Sustainable Consumption and Production 2023-2030 by the 10YFP Board, following a consultative process involving member states and stakeholders, and calls upon member states, United Nations entities, and stakeholders to support its implementation and resource mobilization as part of the international efforts to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, its SDGs, and the objectives of MEAs. In this regard, we invite the Executive Director to support the efforts of implementation, noting that the Global Strategy for Sustainable Consumption is aligned with UNEA Resolution 5/11 on circular economy, UNEP's medium-term strategy, and its delivery model. The strategy outlines 4 priority actions which echo many of the elements discussed in this annual subcommittee. The priorities are: first, further position sustainable consumption and production as an essential requirement and means to achieve global commitments for sustainable development, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Second, enable changes through circularity, transformative multi-stakeholder and public-private partnerships, and tools and solutions across high-impact sectors. Third, empower countries, in particular developing ones, and stakeholders to mainstream and implement sustainable consumption and production patterns, leveraging the UN Development System. Fourth, foster a global movement and commitments for action by growing and amplifying the LIFE campaign for sustainable consumption and production based on a coherent, science-based narrative to change how we think about, act on, and talk about consumption and production. Finally, I wish to thank the excellent work carried out by the 10YFP Secretariat, as well as fellow board members, member states, and the group of friends of SCP, which ensured the adoption of the global strategy of SCP for the 2023-2030 period. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Costa Rica. Your comments as last speaker in my list, the list of countries requesting for the floor. I have Sri Lanka. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates. Our delegation aligns with the previous concerns that updating the progress of implementing resolutions could be improved under this agenda item. Concerning the resolution 5/2, the resolution requested member states to share information on national action plans as available and accelerate actions to significantly reduce nitrogen waste globally by 2030 and beyond through the improvement of sustainable nitrogen management. Therefore, we expect the postponed nitrogen working group meeting will be convened and co-chairs will be identified early. We appreciate the new portal that enable member countries to share lessons and information which will be useful to develop national action plans. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sri Lanka. Now we go with major groups, children and youth major group. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the floor. I am Teresia Gitau from Kenya, speaking on behalf of the children and youth major groups to UNEP. It is an honor for me to present the voice of the youth constituency in regard to the implementation of the outcomes of UNEA 5.2. We appreciate the progress made towards implementation of the 14 resolutions adopted in UNEA 5 and the flexibility at this point to take guidance on further implementation of the resolutions. On the outset, we highlight the following points. First, UNEA 5.2 set forth several independent processes, such as the International Negotiating Committee on Plastics, the Chemicals and Waste Panel, among others. We want to highlight that stakeholders and civil society engagement in these processes should not be designed from scratch, but be based upon existing models and best practices or in the spirit of no regression. The model at UNEA should be used as a baseline. On the resolution of reform management, we welcome that efforts are being made to hire young people under the Young Talent Program. We further highlight that when new processes or groups are initiated through the UNEA resolution, it is to ensure that youth and civil society organizations are part of the implementation of the resolutions and indicators on the success of each resolution. For the nature-based solution resolution, there are 48 indicators, and we should deploy indicator-based reporting for further resolutions as well. We welcome the consultation being organized by UNEP on the implementation of UNEA resolution on minerals and metal governance in light of the potential constraints that minerals supply chains might pose to the net zero transition. We applaud the efforts of UNEP's economy team to include youth perspectives in the drafting of the vision document and look forward to substantive contribution ahead. In appreciating the interlinkage and complementarity of the resolutions, we observe the need for equal priority across all resolutions that were adopted for their implementation by UNEP. Regarding sustainable consumption and production, we are pleased to share that our sister youth constituency, SCP Youth Platform, recently participated at the board meeting of the One Planet Network in Paris last week, and we are delighted that youth perspectives have been included in the new global strategy for sustainable consumption and production. On matter of the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, we highlight our concern that recently a survey have been circulated which asks an open question as to which major groups should and should not be engaged in the process, including if or not children and youth constituency should be engaged. This is concerning to us, as our engagement in intergovernmental processes should not be decided through an anonymous survey. We would like to further understand how the responses from the survey will be used, or if the survey can be edited, and we look forward to a dialogue with the Secretariat on this matter this week. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Children and Youth Major Group, for your comments, very valuable ones. Now, taking into account the many comments and questions made by delegations this afternoon, I'd like to give the floor to the Secretariat to respond to them as much as you could. So, Tim, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will begin to respond to as many as possible. I'll also refer to my colleague Sonja to assist as well. I'd like to first start by thanking all delegations for such detailed comments on many of the resolutions, if not all of the resolutions. So I think it's a very good indication of interest and support for our implementation of these resolutions. Many of you have made general comments in addition to some questions about what your process is and how you are implementing the resolutions and how you'd like to see us better implement those resolutions. For those comments, I would like to note that all of the relevant directors are in the meeting and taking very good notes of all of your comments and suggestions and are taking these on board. So let me respond to as many of the specific questions as I can before handing over to my colleague Sonja. The comments from Indonesia, thank you very much for the positive comments on the portal. I'm glad you were able to get in. And that's very encouraging that you appreciated the portal and the data there. You made a number of comments on the technical notes, which I will allow my colleague Sonja to respond to. Many comments, and I think started by Peru as well as Brazil, Norway, and several others mentioned the resolutions on plastic pollution, the science policy panel as well. And so we've taken note on that, and thank you very much for that feedback. From Brazil specifically, point taken on the multiple pathways for circular economy for the circular economy resolution, and we welcome your support for the approval of the 10 YFP global strategy on sustainable consumption and production. We've also taken note in particular about using the full resolution name for resolution 510 on the environmental dimension of a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive post-COVID-19 recovery, as opposed to the shorthand that has been referred to as green recovery. Thank you very much for that. Regarding the issue on the consultations on resolution 5.4 on biodiversity and health, we did have a webinar earlier this year on the One Health Joint Plan of Action on the 23rd of May. I understand that might not have been enough and you'd like to have some further consultation on that. So we are already thinking about how that might be done in the context of the CPR calendar for the remaining part of the year. Regarding comments from the European Union, specifically questions about how resolutions relate to the program of work. As noted, the technical notes attempt to do that in advance of the negotiation of the resolutions, and what we do after the resolutions, as I mentioned in my short presentation on the portal, is that we do include a section in the resolution reporting portal where the linkages are to the program of work and the SDGs, and we hope that this provides some additional information as we move ahead to implement. We take note of the other comments you've made on what the technical notes could include, including whether or not they're related to other existing resolutions or whether they're replacing other resolutions. That's important very much for the Secretariat as well as for you. We've taken note of your request to see an early implementation plan and the budget and expected partners, and we'll discuss how we might be able to address this as possible. And we take note that the fact that you've said that our ability to do this in advance might also help ease the resolution passing, as well as reduce the number of resolutions which we've heard from most delegations leading up to UNEA. Again, thank you to delegation, the representative of Cuba and others for the comments and suggestions on many of the resolutions. From the Russian Federation, note is taken about the step-by-step guide on the portal, and we will undertake now to resend that guide in addition to the capacity building seminars, which we will carry out through the CPR. On Switzerland, lake management and the new knowledge hub. Actually, the knowledge hub that was mentioned in the resolution was not mentioned in the resolution, I'm sorry, but we utilized the term in the portal simply as a way of conceptualizing the request to the executive director in the resolution that specifically asked to facilitate collaboration between member states of the United Nations or members of specialized agencies in doing research, capacity building, and the sharing of knowledge, information, and best practices, including through North-South, South-South, and triangular cooperation. UNEP is currently discussing with member states that are interested in championing the implementation of the Lakes Resolution, how to address this task, drawing on existing research, knowledge centers, and others. Notes taken as well by Switzerland on the comments on resolutions 511, 512 on minerals and metals, and your interest in further assisting in these consultations. For Canada, thank you very much for the overall comments that you've made across several resolutions, including the importance of the nature-based solutions definition on the Science Policy Panel on plastics, GEO, and others. Regarding the question from the United Kingdom, thank you very much on the interest in the animal welfare resolution. UNEP has set up some seed funding already to initiate the desk study and scoping report, which is planned for 2023. The report outputs will be a methodology, design, and fundraising strategy, as well as stakeholder mapping. Although we recognize that the money that is going in now as seed funding is not sufficient to cover the entire implementation of the resolution, it will enable us to initiate the consultative process, including a peer review. We do have ongoing discussions as well with the World Organization on Animal Health, WOHAH, about resource mobilization, and we will also discuss during the upcoming meeting in Botswana, where we anticipate additional discussion on resolution funding, which is on the agenda. As I mentioned, the USA, thank you very much. Several comments made here. We've taken well note on the one specific question on resolution 511. The global strategy, which has been referred to by member states in a positive light, contributes to the shift societal choices and markets towards low carbon, circular, less polluting, and nature supportive consumption and production patterns, with a view towards reducing the environmental footprint and addressing wherever relevant the challenges of over and under consumption. Building on the progress achieved so far and under the framework of the strategy and the UNEA resolution, UNEP will support coherent actions to add value to current international efforts in the area of circularity in the context of the sustainable consumption and production, and with the partners of the One Planet Network, including other leading platforms on circularity, such as GACERE. The goal is to encourage the implementation of circular policies and business models in high impact system and sectors, and contribute to the achievement of several targets set by the international community, and to build cohesion across programs. Netherlands, thank you very much for a very good list of comments on how we can provide more input to the resolution implementation, as well as the comments on various resolutions. Costa Rica and Sri Lanka, again, thank you very much for your comments on various resolutions that are being under implementation right now, and as well to the children and youth. We will look into the issues of the survey with colleagues that are involved in these resolutions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me pass over to my colleague, Sanjay.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the very rich set of comments that we have received on what we could do or need to do to shift in how we manage UNEA resolutions, both as we negotiate them going forward, but also in how we track and implement them. As the ED said before she had to leave, we're clearly reflecting on how we will manage this going forward. And so your inputs and your ideas help us. But as you would have heard, there are many different ideas and many different elements coming from the room. So allow us perhaps to get some of your statements in writing, to reflect on this, and to come up perhaps with a list of the solutions, which we can then share back in terms of having some feedback, because there are many elements. For example, the practice of sharing budgets as part of the technical notes that we prepare was actually an outcome of UNEA 3 going into UNEA 4, where we were asked by the CPR to provide this information going forward. This is where the practice started. And actually it was part of the CPR review, and it was concluded that we should continue to provide this. Now we know that it's imperfect. We do know that because at the time when the negotiations are being taken, we often have just a subject, yes, the subject and a little bit of it. But what we endeavor to do is we work with teams on a potential zero-based costing of what it may cost in terms of staff and non-staff. We then do a quick look to match in our program of work to see how quickly it matches, and if we have any resources, we deduct that, and then we put the remainder in the technical report. But indeed, they do change, because as the resolution builds and negotiation builds around the resolution, different elements or factors may be added or withdrawn, etc. So there appears to be a need to do a post-UNEA resolutions reporting or costing and provide some updates. That's one thing I hear coming as a suggestion that we can definitely look at, but there are many, many others in terms of how we report. If I just may say also, traditionally, when we had resolutions and UNEA 5.2 was particularly successful, we had 14 resolutions. Often we don't have that many. There is an assumption that there will be extra budgetary resources. This is what Inga was alluding to earlier for all of them. And all because when you give us the approval for our program of work, it is before we even know what may be coming. So it just reiterates her statement before that perhaps our process is incomplete. We gave one idea on how we could do so, but definitely we are looking to hear, perhaps as you have heard this discussion today, even more ideas apart from what you've told us on how we get ready for the next one, and how we also demonstrate our commitment to supporting their implementation of all the resolutions. So that's in a general form, and we'll have to see how we place it on the agenda or how we do consultations. But I am pleading, we will need you to come in and look at the various options on that. And on a more specific query that was raised by a delegate from Indonesia, thank you for sharing that you have read that publication. We are quite proud of that publication, and we hope that it will be of use to have quick wins. It's a brochure type, so it doesn't hold everything, but what I think the team is also proud of is that there is actually an online digitalized version to that. And on that digitalized version, there is a link and it shows all 14 resolutions. So that is how we manage, how we present in a brochure and how we get the information. So that was just a very specific question, but the rest I think we will have to get back, Mr. Chair, as we reflect on the rich comments that we have and ideas that we can offer to move this forward. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim and Sonia, for your comments, answers to the very rich exchange we had this afternoon. I'm sure that you have taken due note of all that, and I think most of that information, ideas presented by delegations will be duly reflected in the chair summary. So with this, the committee has thus concluded its consideration of item 5, agenda item 5. And we have still a few minutes. Let me, yes, okay. The committee will now consider agenda item 6, organizational effectiveness of the United Nations Environment Program. This agenda item includes 3 sub-items, namely sub-item A, organizational approach to the delivery of the medium-term strategy 2022-2025 and program of work. Sub-item B, operational efficiency and effectiveness. And sub-item C, presentation from the Evaluation Office of the United Nations Environment Program. We shall now consider sub-item A, organizational approach to the delivery of the medium-term strategy 2022-2025 and program of work. And sub-items B and C will be considered tomorrow morning. So we'll go into sub-item A. I'm pleased to give the floor then to Mr. Tim Kasten, Director of Policy and Program Division, and Mr. Ibrahim Gora, Deputy Director of the Policy and Program Division, to introduce this item. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and distinguished representatives. We appreciate this opportunity to address the subcommittee on the topic of UNEP delivery in the context of our 2022 to 2025 medium-term strategy and program of work, and how we are working to enhance our effectiveness and efficiency to better respond to requests for support from you, our member states. UNEP's new medium-term strategy for 2022 to 2025 and program of work represent the biggest change to UNEP's results framework in more than a decade, indeed since the introduction of the UNEP sub-programs. This new results framework and UN reform efforts provided an excellent opportunity for us to revisit UNEP's approach to delivery, essentially the how of how UNEP will make that effective in a positive change, our new medium-term strategy. We believe this new approach will allow UNEP to be more responsive to member states and enable enhanced coherence and impact of our delivery. Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd now like to ask my colleague, Ibrahim Gora, Deputy Director of the Policy and Program Division, to present UNEP's delivery model to the subcommittee.
Thanks, Tim. So just picking up from there, just to set out that from 1st of January of 2022, the new medium-term strategy sets out more focused objectives for UNEP centered around the 3 planetary crises of climate change, nature loss, and pollution, and defines who we are as UNEP and where we want to go in an integrated way. The medium-term strategy is the lighthouse steering the direction of our ship for the next 4 years and beyond. The focus on the triple planetary crisis is now a priority for the entire UN system. The Secretary General himself has made this clear, and most recently in our common agenda, and we must deliver against this expectation for ourselves and our constituents, as well as the entire UN system. Whilst there are no shortage of environmental problems in the world, UNEP will focus on the most significant, setting the direction for others to follow. We must put our efforts on the most game-changing opportunities for impact, informed by the best and latest science. Integration means we have 3 strategic objectives and 3 theories of change for all of UNEP's work. This provides for better synergies and integration across all of UNEP's work and with divisions and regional offices and also sub-programs. Whereas in the past, we've had separate theories of change for each sub-program. Now we have 3. And I know the text up there is small. You don't need to read the text. It's just to provide an indication that we have 3 theories of change going through the sub-programs. The text is actually available in the programmable work itself. The new delivery model defines 5 principles for an effective and efficient UNEP and to better fulfill UNEP's mission and mandate. At the broadest level, UNEP's mission encourages the organization to work to 1. Inform by synthesizing the best science for policy relevant change. 2. To inspire action by convening leaders and communicating the urgency of the triple climate, nature and pollution crises. And 3. To enable by supporting countries and communities to put in place the systems and structures necessary for a healthy planet. The guiding principles of the delivery model are, and I'll just go through them with a little bit of text. So firstly, coherent strategic leadership by moving to a coherent, focused and disciplined leadership whose focus extends through the organization for shared leadership at all levels. This needs to ensure ownership and accountability while being globally coherent and locally responsive. Secondly, aligned entrepreneurship by creating shared focus and joint activities in service of a larger set of ambitions. This needs to encourage innovation and risk-taking where relevant, so long as it is in line with the strategy. Next, systemic collaboration and partnership by creating conditions and structures that support the building of trust, mutual support, and mutual learning. Coordination and joint working across thematic and organizational boundaries. Fourthly, integrated capability development by investing in longer-term systemic capability to enable UNEP to shift how it functions and multiply its impact. And finally, operational excellence by migrating opaque, inconsistent, and incomplete processes to clear, transparent, continuously improving performance monitoring and data-rich, disciplined routines. So how does this allow us to be responsive to member states, including through the UN reform? So as Tim mentioned yesterday in the presentation on UN reform, that whilst the MTS presents a globally coherent picture, we also need to ensure that our efforts are responsive to country needs, and the UN reform gives us plenty of opportunity to do so. In being globally coherent, yet locally responsive, the new delivery model allows us to be fully cognizant that there are regional and national specificities. Priority in one country may have a different tilt in another. For example, our focus on leaving no one behind as a principle in the medium-term strategy could be social protection in one country and poverty reduction in another, all with an environmental lens, of course. The delivery model also enables us to have greater dialogue with project target countries to ensure a demand-driven approach, that what we are delivering is what is needed and what is wanted. As set out in my first slide, we will be focused and coherent. This, however, doesn't mean we will have the same approach everywhere. It's about knowing what countries and regions want and need and using the drivers of change for real results. There is an increasing demand from the resident coordinators to build the capacity of UN country teams to respond to the triple planetary crisis and make the case for action at country level. We must be smart and strategic in leveraging this opportunity, knowing where to put our efforts, what to present as part of our offer, and what to delegate to others. Unfortunately, from a number of reviews and audits over recent years, fragmentation is keeping UNEP from realizing its potential. I won't go through all the statements, but just to highlight that some of the findings found that there's tensions between headquarters and some regional offices. There may be an absence of coordination and cooperation mechanisms between UNEP and regional offices and divisions, and potentially even a work culture of rivalries, just highlighting some quotes from audits and recent evaluations. What we cannot do is have mini UNEP franchises in the regions, recreating our main organizational structure in each region. We are not big enough for that, nor was this the original mandate of UNEP. If we miss the next 10 years trying to compensate for this fragmentation, we'll have missed a huge opportunity to impact positive change and address the triple planetary crisis, which requires our full and focused urgent attention. We have addressed this through a new delivery model, which allows UNEP to function as a more effective organization. This new delivery model aims to support three features of UNEP's work. Firstly, on the focus on the triple planetary crisis of climate, nature loss and pollution, and on the most game-changing solutions, as I've mentioned previously. Time is of the essence. These really are crises and have to impact what we need to do to improve the way we work. Secondly, teamwork to deliver as one UNEP so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Things were working, but through thematic and organizational silos. Moreover, UN reform requires us to enhance delivery to member states, collecting information on what they need and responding to what they need. A core pattern within UNEP is a focus on office, branch, and unit and project-based action, not always coordinated and strategic engagement. This is what we're changing to work together as a better team, as one UNEP. And thirdly, accountability, to ensure a clear line of sight from results for delivery. To have an impact, UNEP needs to be greater than the sum of its parts. UNEP has some of the most passionate, dedicated, and capable staff in the environmental space. However, we need to do more to support each other to leverage our roles, skills, and capabilities. When we strengthen UNEP as a whole, each part of UNEP must also be strengthened. We should no longer be doing small projects. This is not UNEP's niche, and it will not drive the change we aim for. We need to focus. We need to have clear fiduciary standards and accountability, managing our risks and maximizing quality in everything we do. As per our new MTS and program of work, UNEP has three main types of intervention, just to set that out. Firstly, direct. This is where UNEP plays a direct role, setting the scene for transformational change through science-driven global advocacy, capacity development, and stakeholder mobilization to upscale innovative solutions through partnerships and networks. Secondly, enabling, which enables UNEP, through which UNEP enables others to initiate systemic change by supporting policy-making changes in behaviors and attitudes, development of norms and standards, and institutional strengthening. And finally, influencing. UNEP influences others to achieve social, economic, and political transformational change through strengthened global norms and standards. But we do this enabling, influencing, and direct implementation through various means or subcategories, just to set them out. Firstly is on generation and dissemination of science policy knowledge, including through scientific networks, coalitions and platforms, substantive advocacy, technical materials and databases, and digital materials. B is on technical support and capacity building and advisory services. This is done including through policy and regulatory development, demonstration and pilot testing, innovative solutions and technologies, scaling up activities with partners and training at events. C is advocacy and outreach, including outreach programs and special events and information materials. And finally, D is intergovernmental and interagency processes, including conference and secretariat services, the provision of secretariats of multilateral environmental agreements, and support for our One UN processes. And it's important that we categorize these, and it's clear how we communicate these to the rest of the world, including to our stakeholders. While some of these are global, by no means exclusively in this scope. Whilst we can now better describe what we do, we need to make some operational changes to work better as a one UNEP. Much of the technical support, capacity building and advisory services take place at the regional and country level and must be responsive to demand. It is only this area of work where there has been some operational changes, and I'll take you through these in the next slides. To achieve the change that the world needs, each part of UNEP needs to play its role, as mentioned previously. So the balance of project management, technical expertise, and responsibilities will shift, specifically in that category B I highlighted in the previous slide. Regional offices on the left-hand side of the slide will need to be the political anchors and provide the analysis of which countries will drive the biggest impact and where engagement is needed the most. The regional offices will assume the responsibility for representation of UNEP to member states and country teams in the regions. This will involve representing the entirety of UNEP's work to member states, advising on environmental priorities for their region, and guiding the implementation of projects to deliver results in their region, including by hosting sectoral and thematic experts from divisions in their offices for the delivery of those projects. Technical divisions, meanwhile, must be the project managers of our technical quality. Overall, the policy advice we provide on chemicals management, for example, in Cambodia must be consistent with Cameroon and Colombia, not singling out any countries, just to prove the point. Our policy work needs to be tailored to national needs. Absolutely, but overall, we need to be technically consistent. This is ultimately more efficient and effective. Technical divisions will be responsible for working with regional offices to design and deliver appropriate interventions to inform, inspire, and enable environmental action in pursuit of the results described in the medium-term strategy. Sub-allotments where regional offices implement specific aspects of projects will continue where necessary and agreed. In short, while overall accountability for project implementation is held by divisions, responsibility for overall impact of UNEP is very much shared across the organization. The emphasis is on creating the conditions for divisions and regions to work together to co-create the various interventions UNEP delivers in line with the prevailing processes of UN reform. And the regions will receive additional funding and have done to carry out this new role. So just to summarize, and I won't go through the details of this slide because we are a bit late and you do have them, but there are four areas to improve our implementation in the delivery model. So the principles of delivery, the typology of interventions, implementation accountability, and then coordination of all of that. Just to be clear, that the delivery model is not a restructuring. It does not change how UNEP uses the project, but it does not reduce regional and country projects, but does make UNEP even more responsive to country needs in a coherent way. There are a few supplemental tools and processes we're also developing. Firstly, there's a concept approval group. This is at the senior management level, and it's designed to improve strategic alignment of project concepts right at the outset and alignment to the medium-term strategy and program work before full project development. And also enhance collaboration, project design, approval, implementation, monitoring and reporting for better and more efficient monitoring and engagement with clear roles and responsibilities and workflows. And finally, just the transition. 1st of October is where we launched the delivery model, so the beginning of this month. As of the 1st of January 2023, all projects coming for revision are approved in line with the new delivery model. And then by January 2024, we'll transition all remaining legacy projects to the new system. Thank you very much, distinguished delegates, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goram, and thank you very much, Tim, for this very clear and rich presentation on this item 6A of the agenda. Given the very late time of this afternoon session, I like to close the meeting. We'll continue with questions and answers tomorrow morning. So with this, if the Secretariat has anything to say, an announcement, we shall convene again tomorrow at 10 o'clock. The meeting then is adjourned. See you tomorrow.